Welcome back to Night Visitors. Tonight we're heading deep into Canada's Yukon Territory with 7 most disturbing true Yukon horror stories. These stories come from real people, emergency workers, delivery drivers, nurses, and regular folks who experience something they still can't explain. Each account happened in one of the most isolated places on Earth, where the cold can kill you in minutes and darkness lasts for months. These aren't made-up tales. These are real experiences from people who saw things in the Yukon that changed their lives forever. We've got stories about missing school buses, strange houses that appear and disappear, things living in old mines, and creatures that shouldn't exist. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Night Visitors for more true horror stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we post. Now let's dive into these 7 disturbing stories from the Yukon wilderness, where civilization ends and something dark begins. Some of these stories will stay with you long after this video ends. You've been warned. Let's get started with story number 1. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been working as an emergency dispatcher for the Yukon Territory Emergency Services for 12 years. I started right out of college with my communications degree, thinking I'd help people and make a difference. Over the years, I've handled everything you can imagine: heart attacks, car crashes, house fires, missing hikers. I've talked people through CPR while paramedics raced to save their loved ones. I've stayed on the line with scared kids hiding from intruders until police arrived. I thought I'd heard it all. But what happened on February 15th, 2023, during the worst blizzard we'd seen in decades, changed everything I thought I knew about my job. That day taught me that sometimes the voices calling for help aren't coming from where you think they are. The storm had been building all morning. By 2 p.m., we'd already had 6 fender benders and 2 jackknife trucks on the highways. The Weather Service was calling it a historic blizzard event. Temperatures dropping to -40, winds gusting over 60 miles per hour, and snow falling so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. We'd activated our emergency protocols and were telling people to stay inside unless it was life or death. Our dispatch center is a windowless room in the basement of the government building in Whitehorse. Banks of computers line the walls, each station equipped with multiple monitors showing GPS maps, weather radar, and unit locations. The radio console in front of me controls communications for emergency vehicles across thousands of square miles of wilderness. Red lights indicate active emergency channels, green shows normal traffic, and yellow warns of equipment problems. That afternoon, I was working Station 3, handling radio traffic for the southern districts. My supervisor, Dale Thompson, was covering the north routes from Station 1. We had 6 other dispatchers on duty, more than usual because of the storm. The coffee was strong, the heaters were humming, and we were settling in for what we expected to be a long, difficult shift. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my radio crackled to life on Channel 7, the school district emergency frequency. "Dispatch, this is Bus 47, emergency traffic over." The voice was female, stressed but professional. I immediately pulled up the school bus tracking system on my computer. Bus 47 was assigned to the Pine Valley Elementary route, driver Lisa Chen, 23 children on board. "Bus 47, this is dispatch, go ahead with your emergency," I replied, grabbing my incident log. "Dispatch, we've got complete engine failure on Highway 37, about 15 miles south of Ross River. The bus just died. No warning, no strange sounds, just everything stopped working. We're stuck in the middle of nowhere, and this blizzard is getting worse fast." I could hear children's voices in the background. Not panicked yet, but confused and starting to worry. Lisa's voice was calm, but I could detect the fear underneath. Highway 37 was one of the most remote stretches in the territory, with no cell coverage and sometimes no traffic for hours. "Copy Bus 47, confirming engine failure on Highway 37, 15 miles south of Ross River. What's your current situation with heat and shelter?" "The engine's completely dead, so no heat. Temperature inside the bus is already dropping. I've got all the kids in the back half of the bus and we're using emergency blankets, but it's getting cold fast. These kids are only wearing regular school clothes." I immediately started the rescue protocol, typing Lisa's location into our emergency response system. The nearest tow truck was in Whitehorse, over 2 hours away in good weather. In this blizzard, it would take much longer. Bus 47, I'm dispatching a rescue team now. Due to weather conditions, we're looking at approximately 2 hours for arrival. Can you maintain heat using any other methods? Negative on alternate heat sources. I've got the emergency supplies. Blankets, some hand warmers, energy bars. The kids are scared but following instructions. We're singing songs to keep their spirits up. For the next 30 minutes, I maintained regular contact with Lisa every 15 minutes. Each time she reported the same thing, temperature dropping steadily, but kids staying calm. She was doing everything right, keeping them occupied with songs and stories, rotating the warmest spots, making sure everyone stayed covered. At 4:15 p.m., Lisa's voice came through the radio again, but something had changed. Dispatch, I'm seeing some lights approaching through the snow. I checked my screen. Our rescue team wasn't even halfway there yet. Bus 47, can you confirm rescue vehicle approaching? We show our unit still en route, approximately 90 minutes out. I can see lights coming down the highway from the north. Maybe it's a different rescue team, or someone driving by who can help. I contacted our rescue coordinator immediately. No other units had been dispatched to that area. Highway 37 had been officially closed to civilian traffic an hour ago. Bus 47, we have no emergency vehicles in your area at this time. Exercise caution with any unknown persons. Lisa's voice came back 3 minutes later, and I could hear the change immediately. The professional calm was cracking. Dispatch, there are people walking toward the bus. They're not wearing any winter clothes. It's -40 out here, and they don't even have coats on. The hair on my arm stood up. Nobody could survive outside in that weather without proper gear, especially not walking around casually. Bus 47, how many individuals do you see? I count 12. No, wait, more are coming out of the snow. They're just walking toward us like the weather doesn't exist. This doesn't make sense. In the background, I could hear children's voices getting higher, more anxious. Miss Lisa, why don't they have coats on? Miss Lisa, how come they're not cold? Lisa's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. Dispatch, something's really wrong here. I can see their faces now, and they're smiling, but it's wrong. The smiles don't reach their eyes, and their skin looks too pale, almost blue. My training kicked in, but this wasn't covered in any manual. I alerted Dale and the other dispatchers. We started checking for any missing persons reports, any mental health patients who might have wandered off, anything that could explain people walking around in deadly cold. At 4:25 p.m., everything changed. Dispatch, they're surrounding the bus. They're pressing their hands against the windows. The kids are getting really scared now. I can see their handprints on the frost. The prints are ice cold, but the hands look... God, they look frozen solid. I could hear children starting to cry in the background, their voices rising in fear. Get away from the windows, kids. Everyone move to the center of the bus. Bus 47, are the individuals attempting communication? Are they responsive to verbal commands? I'm trying to talk to them through the window, but they're not answering. They just keep smiling and pressing closer. Wait. How are they opening the door? I locked that door. The sound that came through the radio next made my blood run cold. The hydraulic hiss of the bus door opening, followed by children screaming in terror. I locked that door, Lisa shouted. The controls are dead. There's no power. How did they... At 4:30 p.m., Lisa's voice became desperate, pleading, Please don't hurt the children. Take me, but please leave the kids alone. Then a new voice came through the radio, young, sweet, like a child speaking very carefully. We just want to play with them. We've been waiting so long for friends. I grabbed Dale's add-in, ancient frantically. We were both listening now, along with 2 other dispatchers. The child's voice was coming through Bus 47's radio, but there was something wrong with it. Too clear, too calm, like it was being spoken directly into the microphone. Horrible screaming filled the radio, children crying, Lisa begging, and sounds I'll never forget. Metal tearing, like the roof of the bus was being peeled open, wind howling through the open vehicle. They're so warm, the child's voice said again, and I realized it was speaking directly into Lisa's radio handset. We've been cold for so long, so very cold. Lisa's terrified whisper came through. They're taking the children outside, into the snow. Dear God, They're taking them outside, and the kids aren't fighting anymore. Then impossibly, I heard children's voices. But they sounded wrong, too calm, speaking in unison. "Miss Lisa, come play with us. It's not cold anymore. Come play with us in the snow." Lisa screamed, "Those aren't my kids! Those voices! That's not how they sound!" Then silence. Complete radio silence. I called frantically into the radio. "Bus 47, please respond. Lisa, are you there?" Nothing. Dale immediately contacted our rescue teams, demanding emergency response regardless of weather conditions. The storm was still raging, but we had children's lives at stake. At 6:00 p.m., our rescue team finally reached the coordinates. What they found didn't make sense. The bus was there, but both doors had been torn completely off their hinges. The vehicle was empty. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle inside. But scattered in the snow around the bus were children's clothes, mittens, hats, coats, boots, all arranged in neat little piles leading away from the road toward the tree line. The rescue team followed a trail of footprints in the snow, but there were too many prints, way more than 23 children. The trail led through the forest to the edge of a frozen lake about half a mile from the road. At the lake, the footprints just ended, like everyone had walked onto the ice and vanished. One of our divers went down through a hole they cut in the ice. What he found 20 feet below the surface made no sense at all. There was another school bus down there, an old one, sitting upright on the lake bottom like it had just driven off the ice. When the diver shined his light through the windows, he saw skeletons still strapped into the seats, 23 small skeletons and one adult, all wearing winter clothes from the 1980s. The underwater bus was Bus 31 from Pine Valley Elementary. It had crashed through the ice during a blizzard in February 1987. 23 children and their driver, Margaret Stewart, had died when the bus broke through during a sudden warm spell. But here's what kept me awake for months afterward. When we analyzed the audio recording from that day, we found things that shouldn't have been possible. During the moments when Lisa was frantically trying to keep the children calm, we could hear more voices than there should have been. She had 23 kids on her bus, but the audio analysis counted 36 different children's voices. When the strange child's voice spoke directly into the radio, voice pattern analysis showed it was actually multiple children speaking in perfect unison, their voices layered over each other. Most disturbing of all, some of the children's voices we recorded that day matched voice prints from the 1987 bus crash. The children who had been dead for 35 years were somehow talking through Lisa's radio. We never found Lisa or any of the current children. The search continued for weeks, but it was like they had simply vanished into thin air. 3 months later, I was working the night shift when radio chatter started coming through on Channel 7. Children's voices calling for help, reporting their bus had broken down on Highway 37. The voices were coming from the bottom of the frozen lake. I transferred to a different department after that. I couldn't handle emergency dispatch anymore, couldn't trust that the voices calling for help were really coming from the living. Highway 37 is officially closed during winter months now. The school district rerouted all buses to avoid that area completely. But sometimes, during bad winter storms, other dispatchers still report hearing children's voices on the emergency frequencies asking for help that never comes. The lake is still there, still frozen. And if you know how to listen to the right radio frequency on snowy February nights, you can still hear them calling. All 46 children playing together forever in the cold, dark water, waiting for the next bus to break down when the storms come. I never answered another emergency call from Highway 37, and I never will. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I drove pizza delivery in Whitehorse for 8 years. 8 winters where the temperature hit -40. 8 summers where the sun barely set. 8 years of knowing every street, every shortcut, every house that tipped well. In the Yukon, you learn the roads or you die. Simple as that. GPS doesn't work half the time up here. Cell service cuts out in the valleys. You rely on your own knowledge, your own instincts. I thought mine were perfect. I thought I knew what was real and what wasn't. I was wrong about everything. This happened last October. I need to tell someone before I completely lose my mind. I started at Angelo's Pizzeria right after dropping out of Yukon College. Failed out, actually. Too much drinking, too many late nights at the 98 Hotel. My mom stopped talking to me. My girlfriend left. I needed money, and Angelo hired anyone with a car and a pulse. The job was simple. Take the pizza, drive to the address, collect the money. I was good at it. Really good. After 8 years, I could navigate Whitehorse blindfolded. Riverdale, Porter Creek, Hillcrest, I knew them all. Knew which roads washed out in spring melt. Knew which neighborhoods you didn't stop in after dark. Knew where the moose crossed and which turns iced over first in October. I drove a 2008 Honda Civic with 287,000 kilometers on it. The heat worked, the engine was solid, and I'd put winter tires on it myself every October. I had a phone mount, a Garmin GPS that was 3 years out of date, and commercial insurance that cost me $400 a month. Everything by the book because I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not again. Steve, my manager, trusted me with the late shifts. The 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. runs when most drivers quit after 1 week. They couldn't handle the darkness, the isolation, the cold. But I didn't mind. Fewer people meant fewer complications. In the Yukon winter, you learn to be alone with your thoughts. Sometimes that's all you've got. October 17th was a Thursday. I remember because Thursday was my 8-year anniversary at Angelo's, and I'd mentioned it to Steve that morning. He'd grunted and said, "Good for you." That was Yukon praise, short and honest. The shift had been normal. 6 deliveries between 9 and 11 p.m. Then at 11:17, a new order came through the system. Large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese. Delivery to 1247 Birch Street. Customer already paid online. $32 with a $5 tip added. Delivery instructions. Ring doorbell twice. I loaded the pizza into my warming bag. Birch Street, that's Northwood subdivision, right? I asked Steve. He looked at the screen. Yeah, that new development past the Alaska Highway Junction. Built it 3 years ago. I nodded. I'd delivered there before. Nice houses, quiet streets, decent tips. The subdivision was one of those government-funded developments trying to handle Whitehorse's housing shortage. All the houses looked identical. Beige vinyl siding, black roofs, 2-car garages. Young families mostly. Public servants. Mine workers on rotation. The roads were empty. My headlights cut through the October darkness as I drove past the Porter Creek supermarket, closed and dark. Past the elementary school. Past the last gas station before the subdivision. The radio played CBC Radio 1, some interview I wasn't really listening to. My coffee was cold in the cup holder. I turned into Northwood at 11:29 p.m. The streetlights here were LED, that cold blue light that makes everything look like a crime scene photo. I drove down Maple Avenue, counting the streets. Aspen, Willow, then Birch. I turned left and watched the house numbers. 1201 Birch Street, 1203, 1205, 1207, 1209, 1211. Then nothing. The street just ended. A dead-end sign. Beyond it, construction EQ. Equipment sat silent behind orange fencing. A new phase of development, not finished yet. I could see the skeletal frames of houses being built, dark against the darker sky. I checked my GPS. The screen showed 1247 Birch Street should be right here, but there was nothing except dirt and a concrete mixer. I pulled over and grabbed my phone, dialing the customer's number from the order ticket. A man answered immediately. Hello? Hi, this is Marcus from Angelo's. I'm having trouble finding your address. Birch Street ends at 1211. Oh, you're at the old dead end. His voice was friendly, patient. A Yukon accent. That slight drawl people get after living here long enough. They just opened the new section 2 weeks ago. Drive through the construction gap on the right. There's a temporary access road. We're the third house on the left after you go through. Through the construction site? Yeah, it's fine. Gravel's packed down. We've had DoorDash, Skip, Pizza. Everyone comes through that way now until they finish the main road. It seemed odd, but this was Whitehorse. Half the city was under construction in summer, and nobody bothered updating maps or GPS. All right, I'll find it. Great, I'm hungry. He laughed and hung up. I looked at the orange construction fencing. There was a gap on the right side, wide enough for a vehicle. I could see tire tracks in the dirt, other deliveries probably. The customer was right. I drove slowly through the gap. My headlights bounced off construction equipment, a backhoe, pallets of lumber, a porta-potty. The temporary road was rough but drivable. After about 100 meters, the construction zone ended and more finished houses appeared. I checked the numbers. 1235, 1239, 1243, 1245, 1247. Nothing. I stopped the car and stared. There was a streetlight illuminating an empty lot, just grass and dirt. A concrete foundation had been poured. I could see the rectangular outline, but no house, no walls, no roof, nothing. I got out of my car, leaving it running. The October air was sharp and cold. I walked to where 1247 should be, just an empty foundation. Through the lot, I could see 1249 Birch Street, a finished house with lights in the windows, a pickup truck in the driveway. But 1247 didn't exist. I called the customer again. Hello? Same voice, same friendly tone. Sir, I'm at 1247 Birch Street. There's no house here, just a foundation. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? I'm standing in my kitchen right now. I can see your headlights through my window. I looked at the empty lot. No windows, no kitchen, no lights. Sir, I'm looking at an empty foundation. No building. Are you sure you went through the construction access? Not the old dead end? Yes, I drove through. I'm at 1247. There's no house. His voice changed, harder now. Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm hungry and I paid for this pizza. I can literally see your car from my window. You're parked right in front of my house. Sir, get out of your car and look at my house, right now. You're telling me you don't see a 2-story house with a gray truck in the driveway? I looked at the empty lot. There's no truck, no driveway, no house. He hung up. My phone rang immediately. Steve. Marcus, what the hell is going on? Customer just called saying you won't deliver his pizza. Steve, the house doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? I'm standing where it should be. There's just an empty foundation, no building. Marcus, are you high right now? No, I'm telling you the address doesn't exist. The customer's calling from his house, Marcus. From 1247 Birch Street. He's inside his house, looking out his window at your car. Are you telling me he's lying? I don't know what he's seeing, but I'm looking at an empty lot. Jesus Christ. Steve sighed. Okay, drive the route again, slowly. Check every number. If you don't find this house in 10 minutes, come back and I'll send Danny. He hung up, and I stood in the cold, staring at the empty foundation. This didn't make sense. I'd been doing this job for 8 years. I knew how to find an address. I knew how to read house numbers. I knew when a building existed or didn't exist. I got back in my car and drove the route again, through the construction gap, down the new section of Birch Street, 1235, 1239, 1243, 1245, 1247. The house was there. I slammed on my brakes so hard the pizza warming bag slid off the passenger seat. A 2-story house, beige siding, black roof, lights on in the windows, warm yellow light spilling onto the lawn, a gray Dodge Ram in the driveway, a concrete walkway leading to the front door, a porch light glowing. The house was there. I sat in my idling car, hands gripping the steering wheel. How had I missed it? I'd walked to this exact spot 30 seconds ago. I'd stood on this exact piece of ground. There had been nothing, just grass and a foundation outline. Now there was a house. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the pizza, still warm, and walked up to the front door. My legs felt disconnected from my body, like I was walking through water. I rang the doorbell twice. The door opened. A middle-aged man stood there, early 50s maybe, thinning brown hair, wearing a red flannel shirt and jeans, completely normal. He smiled. Finally, thought you got lost out there. Sorry about that. GPS was acting weird. I handed him the pizza box. My hands were shaking slightly. You already paid online, so you're all set. Here. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a 20. For your trouble, these new subdivisions are confusing. Thanks. I took the bill. His hand was warm when it brushed mine. Real. Solid. Have a good night. You too. Drive safe. I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see the house getting smaller, lights still on. Perfectly normal. I drove back to Angelo's, my mind racing. I'd somehow missed the house, twice, walked right past it. That was the only explanation. Maybe I'd been more tired than I thought. Maybe the darkness had confused me. Maybe... You find it? Steve asked when I walked in. Yeah, it was there. I don't know, missed it somehow. He looked at me strangely. You feeling okay? Yeah, fine. Just a weird night. The rest of my shift was normal. 2 more deliveries, both easy. I cleaned the warming bags, checked out at 2:15 a.m., and drove home. I lived in a basement apartment on Black Street. Cheap rent, no windows, but it was mine. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that empty lot, about standing in the exact spot where the house appeared minutes later. It didn't make sense. Friday night, I came in for my shift. At 11:28 p.m., a new order appeared on the screen. Large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese, 1247 Birch Street. Same customer, same order, same time. That's weird, I said to Steve. Same guy as last night, exact same order. Steve shrugged. Maybe he's got a routine. Some people order the same thing every Friday. Get moving. I loaded the pizza and drove to Northwood subdivision. This time I was confident. I knew exactly where the house was. Through the construction gap, down the new section, 3rd house on the left. I turned onto Birch Street at 11:39 p.m. 12:35, 12:39, 12:43, 12:45, 12:47. Empty foundation. No house. I stopped the car and turned off the engine. Silence. Just the wind and the distant sound of the Alaska highway. I got out and walked to the lot. Nothing. Grass. Dirt. The concrete foundation outline. That's it. But last night, I'd delivered a pizza here. I'd walked up to the front door. A man had answered. He'd given me a $20 bill. I still had that 20 in my wallet. I pulled out my wallet and found the bill. It was real. Canadian currency. Printed 2018. Serial number FU04518862. Real money. My phone rang. Where the hell is my pizza? The same voice from last night, but angry now. Your driver is parked outside doing nothing. Sir, there's no house here. I'm looking at you right now, he was shouting. I can see you standing in my front yard. Why won't you bring me my pizza? I looked at the empty lot. Sir, I swear, there's nothing here. You're standing 20 feet from my front door. My porch light is on. My truck is in the driveway. What is wrong with you? I walked forward, phone pressed to my ear. I walked to where the front door should be. Nothing. Just air. Sir, I'm walking toward your address. There's no door, no house, just an empty... You're walking toward my mailbox right now. I'm watching you. I stopped. I was standing in the middle of the empty foundation. Cold wind on my face, no mailbox, no porch, no door. Sir, did you order pizza last night too? Silence on the phone. Long silence. Then, yes, you brought it. Don't you remember, Marcus? You came inside. You met my family, my wife Jennifer, my daughters Emma and Sophie. You stayed for a few minutes. We talked about the weather. You said it was getting cold. I said winter comes early in the Yukon. Don't you remember? I didn't remember any of that. I'd handed him the pizza at the door and left. I hadn't gone inside. I hadn't met anyone. But even as I thought that, I could almost see it. A warm kitchen, pine cabinets, a dining table, a woman setting out plates. 2 little girls arguing over who got the first slice. The smell of coffee. The sound of laughter. No, that hadn't happened. Had it? Marcus, you need to bring the pizza inside now. We're hungry. We've been waiting so long. My phone rang with another call. Steve. I switched over. Marcus, where are you? I'm at the address. There's no house, Steve. I swear to God, there's no... I know there's no house, Steve was shouting. I'm looking at the goddamn address right now. I'm parked right behind you. Why are you standing in an empty lot talking to yourself? I spun around. Steve's silver Ford F-150 was parked behind my Civic. He was standing next to it, phone to his ear, staring at me. Steve? I said into the phone. Get in my truck, right now. But the key, you. Stomer. There's no customer. That number doesn't exist. I had dispatch check it 3 times. The order came through the online system, but there's no credit card attached. No name, no account, nothing. I looked at my phone. I was still on a call with the customer. But the screen showed no number, just a timer. 47:23. 47 minutes. I'd only been here for 10 minutes. Marcus, please. Steve's voice was quieter now. Scared. Get in my truck. We're going back to the shop. I looked at the empty lot. Then I looked at Steve's truck. Then back at the lot. The house was there. Every light blazing. The front door open. A man standing in the doorway. But something was wrong with him. His face was wrong. His skin looked melted, dripping, like wax that had gotten too hot. His eyes were holes, black holes where eyes should be. His mouth was open too wide, and I could see that his teeth were charred black stumps. Behind him, inside the house, I could see the dining room. A woman sat at the table, 2 small girls next to her. All 3 of them had the same melted faces, the same empty eye sockets, the same charred skin hanging off their skulls. But they were moving, sitting up straight, reaching for plates, going through the motions of dinner. The man raised his hand, what was left of his hand. The flesh had burned away, leaving just bone and bits of charred meat. His skeletal fingers reached toward me. Thank you, he said. His voice came from somewhere deep inside his throat, wet and bubbling. We're so hungry. We've been so hungry for so long. I ran. I don't remember getting to my car. I don't remember starting it. I just remember driving. Fast. Too fast. Steve's voice on the phone screaming at me to stop. The speedometer climbing. 60, 80, 100. The Alaska Highway intersection. Red light. I didn't stop. The impact, the airbag, the taste of blood. Then no thieves. I woke up in Whitehorse General Hospital 3 days later. October 20th, Sunday afternoon. A nurse told me I'd crashed my car into a light pole at the Alaska Highway junction. 73 kilometers per hour on impact. My Civic was totaled. I was lucky to be alive. A police officer came to take my statement. I couldn't speak. Couldn't form words. Every time I tried to talk, I saw that burned family sitting at their dinner table, reaching for pizza that wasn't there. They moved me to the psychiatric ward on October 21st. Dr. Sarah Chen was assigned to my case. She was patient. She didn't push. She just sat with me until I could finally speak. When I did speak, I told her everything. The deliveries, the empty lot, the house appearing and disappearing, the burned family. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pulled out an iPad and showed me footage. This is from Angelo's Pizzeria security camera, October 17th, 11:15 p.m. I watched myself load a pizza into the warming bag, watched myself walk to my car, drive away. This is traffic camera footage from Alaska Highway, October 17th, 11:42 p.m. I watched my Civic turn into Northwood subdivision. This is from a residential security camera on Birch Street, October 17th, 11:44 p.m. I watched my car park at the construction dead end, watched myself get out holding the pizza box, watched myself walk to the empty lot, and then I watched myself stand there for 11 minutes, just standing, holding the pizza box, staring at nothing. Then I watched myself walk forward, knock on the air, wait, smile, hand the pizza box to empty space, take invisible money from invisible hands, wave, walk back to my car. The pizza box was gone. I'd given it to nothing. No, I whispered. The house was there. The man was real. I have the $20 bill he gave me. Dr. Chen pulled out an evidence bag. Inside was a $20 bill. This bill was in your wallet when they brought you in. Do you know where it came from? The customer gave it to me. Marcus. Her voice was gentle. This bill was reported stolen from Angelo's Pizzeria cash register on October 15th, 2 days before your first delivery to Birch Street. Steve filed a police report. He suspected you took it but didn't have proof. The room tilted. No, that's not possible. I didn't steal anything. The serial number matches. Steve marked it before putting it in the register. I looked at the bill in the evidence bag. FUZ0451862. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Do you remember September 3rd, 2019? 2019? That was 6 years ago. She opened a file folder, pulled out old delivery records. On September 3rd, 2019, you delivered a pizza to 1247 Birch Street. That address existed then. The house was real. My chest tightened. I don't remember. The delivery was at 11:35 p.m. Large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese. Customer name was David Miller. David Miller. The name hit me like a fist. At 11:47 p.m. that night, an electrical fire started in the kitchen of 1247 Birch Street. The fire department was called at 12:03 a.m. by a neighbor who saw smoke. By the time they arrived, the house was fully involved. David Miller, age 51, his wife Jennifer Miller, age 48, their daughters Emma Miller, age 8, and Sophie Miller, age 5. All four died in the fire. I couldn't breathe. The fire investigation determined the cause was faulty wiring in the kitchen, an electrical outlet behind the stove. The outlet had been overloaded and had been sparking for weeks. The fire started about 10 to 15 minutes after your delivery. Dr. Chen pulled out another document, a fire investigator's report. She read, "Witness statement from neighbor at 1249 Birch Street reports seeing a pizza delivery car leaving 1247 Birch Street at approximately 11:38 p.m. Witness states that smoke was visible from a kitchen window at that time, but the delivery driver did not stop or call for help." The room was spinning. The neighbor, or Robert Chen, my father, ran to the house and tried to help, but the door was locked. The smoke was too thick. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. The family had tried to escape through the master bedroom window but couldn't break it. They died together, huddled in the corner. I was crying now. I don't remember any of that. I know you don't, and that's the problem, Marcus. Dr. Chen showed me more documents, psychiatric evaluations, medical records, a diagnosis I didn't understand. You were hospitalized in September 2019 for 3 weeks, severe trauma response. You told the admitting psychiatrist that you'd delivered pizza to a family and then watched their house burn down. You said you tried to help but couldn't. You said you called 911 but your phone didn't work. You created an entire narrative where you were the hero, not the person who drove away. That's not true. I would never. Your phone records show no call to 911 that night. No call to anyone. You drove straight back to Angelo's and completed 2 more deliveries. You acted like nothing had happened. No. 3 days later, when the news reported the fire, you had a complete breakdown. You couldn't remember delivering to that house, couldn't remember seeing smoke. Your mind had completely suppressed the memory. You were diagnosed with dissociative amnesia, triggered by survivor's guilt. I was shaking. I don't remember any of this. I know. After you were released from the hospital, you returned to work. Everyone assumed you'd dealt with the trauma, but you hadn't. You'd buried it. And this October, on the 6-year anniversary of the fire, your mind finally broke. Dr. Chen pulled up more security footage. October 18th, October 19th, October 20th. Every night at 11:30 p.m., I'd driven to Birch Street. Every night, I'd parked at the empty lot. Every night, I'd gotten out with a pizza and delivered it to no one. Angelo's had 3 pizzas missing from inventory. No orders on the books, no payments. Just 3 large pepperoni pizzas, ex-stew, raw cheese, gone. I'd been taking them, loading them in my car during my shift, driving to the empty lot, giving them to ghosts. The house was demolished in October 2019, Dr. Chen said. The foundation was removed in 2020. The lot has been empty for 5 years. The city designated it as a memorial space. No building will ever be constructed there again. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. I saw them, the family. They were burned. They were sitting at the table. They were hungry. I know you saw them. Your mind created that image to force you to confront what you did, or rather, what you didn't do. I didn't know there was a fire. I didn't see smoke. Dr. Chen's expression was sad. Marcus, my father saw you leaving. He saw smoke coming from the kitchen window. He said it was obvious, thick gray smoke, visible even in the dark. He said your car slowed down as you passed the house. He said you looked right at it. No, he said you drove away. The truth hit me then. Not all at once, in pieces, in fragments. In memories I'd buried so deep I'd convinced myself they weren't real. I remembered. I remembered knocking on the door. A man answering. He was annoyed because the pizza was 7 minutes late and he'd ordered at 11:15, not 11:35. I apologized, handed him the pizza, turned to leave. And I remembered the smell. Not smoke yet, but something burning, something electrical. That sharp, acrid smell that makes your nose itch. I remembered looking back, looking at the kitchen window, seeing a faint haze inside, not smoke yet, just something. I remembered thinking, that's not my problem, that's not my job. I remembered getting in my car, I remembered driving away, and I remembered 10 minutes later, sitting in Angelo's parking lot, seeing the glow on the horizon, seeing the fire trucks race past, knowing exactly which house was burning. I remembered going back to work, taking 2 more deliveries, saying nothing. I remembered going home, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I remembered 3 days later when the news reported the names, David Miller, Jennifer Miller, Emma Miller, Sophie Miller. I remembered screaming. I remembered the hospital, the white rooms, the doctors, the pills, the therapy. I remembered forgetting, and now I remembered everything. I spent 4 months in psychiatric care. Dr. Chen worked with me every day. Cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, medication. Slowly, painfully, I learned to separate reality from hallucination. Learned to accept what I'd done. Learned that guilt doesn't just haunt you, it can trap you in a hell of your own making. The hallucinations stopped eventually. The medication helped. But I still heard them sometimes, late at night. Emma and Sophie's voices, high and scared, calling for help. I was released in February. Steve didn't press charges for the stolen pizzas or the damaged car. He just said, "Get better, Marcus." That was it. No anger. Just tired sadness. I couldn't drive anymore. Panic attacks every time I sat in a car. I got a job at Home Hardware, working the day shift, stocking shelves, helping customers find screws and paintbrushes. Simple work, safe work. I sold my car, took the bus everywhere, avoided Northwood subdivision entirely. But every September 3rd, I take a taxi to Whitehorse Memorial Park. The Miller family is buried there, 4 headstones in a row. David Miller, 1968 to 2019. Jennifer Miller, 1971 to 2019. Emma Miller, 2011-2019. Sophie Miller, 2014-2019. Together forever. I bring a pizza, large pepperoni, extra cheese. I leave it on David's grave. The cemetery staff probably think I'm insane. Maybe I am. But it's all I can offer them now. Last month, something changed. I was stocking shelves at Home Hardware when a customer approached me, a man in his 60s. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Marcus Thompson?" he asked. "Yes?" "I'm Robert Chen, Dr. Chen's father. I live at 1249 Birch Street, or I did until 2020. My chest tight. "Hey, Ned. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know." He put his hand on my shoulder. I watched the Miller house burn. I tried to break down the door. I couldn't. I heard them screaming. I heard the little girls calling for their mother. I think about it every day. I could have stopped it, I whispered. If I'd called 911 when I smelled smoke. Maybe. Maybe not. The fire inspector said the wiring had been failing for weeks. It could have happened any time, but yes, if someone had called earlier, they might have gotten out. I'm sorry. I know, but Marcus, here's what I need you to understand. I was there. I tried to help. I did everything I could, and I still have nightmares. I still hear them screaming. Trauma doesn't care if you're the hero or the coward. It destroys you either way. He squeezed my shoulder. The difference is, I forgave myself. And you need to forgive yourself too. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying this guilt will kill you. It almost did. He walked away and I stood there in the hardware store, surrounded by paintbrushes and light bulbs, crying. It's been 18 months since my breakdown. I'm still in therapy. I'm still on medication. I still can't drive. I still avoid Northwood subdivision. But I don't hallucinate anymore. I don't deliver pizzas to ghosts. I don't see burned families in empty lots. I see reality. And reality is this. I made a terrible mistake. I smelled smoke and drove away. 4 people died because I didn't make a phone call. That's the truth. That's what I have to live with. But I also know this. Guilt is a fire that burns from the inside. If you let it, it will consume everything. Your mind, your sanity, your life. It will create monsters and ghosts and impossible houses that appear and disappear. It will trap you in a loop of your own making, delivering pizzas to the dead for eternity. The only way to survive is to, face it. To say, yes, I did this. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, people died. And yes, I have to live with that. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, doesn't bring back the dead, doesn't make the nightmares stop. But it does let you keep living. My name is Marcus Thompson. I was a pizza delivery driver in Whitehorse, Yukon for 8 years. I made a mistake that cost 4 people their lives, and I survived the guilt by losing my mind completely. This is my story. This is my confession. This is the truth about what happened on Birch Street. If you're reading this, if you've ever made a mistake you can't take back, if you've ever felt guilt so crushing it breaks your reality, know this: you're not alone. The mind will do terrible things to protect itself. It will create elaborate delusions. It will show you ghosts. It will trap you in impossible loops. But you can escape. You can face the truth. You can survive. You just have to be willing to remember. Even when remembering is the hardest thing you've ever done. The Miller family is still dead. I can't change that. But I'm still alive. And some days, that has to be enough. My name is Derek Morrison, and I've been a plumber for 16 years. I started right out of high school working with my dad's crew in Calgary. I've crawled through sewers, fixed pipes in flooded basements, and worked in places most people wouldn't go near. I've seen rats the size of cats, dealt with gas leaks that could blow up a building, and pulled things out of drains that would make you sick. I thought I'd seen everything the job could throw at me. But what happened last spring in an abandoned gold mine outside Dawson City changed everything I thought I knew about what lurks in dark places. I'm telling this story because people need to know what's down there. The mining company paid me $15,000 to keep quiet, but some things are more important than money. What I saw in those tunnels isn't gone. It's still there, waiting in the dark, and it's getting hungry. The job came through my boss in March. A mining company was turning an old gold mine into a tourist attraction, and they needed someone to install a complete water system throughout the tunnels. The mine had been sealed since 1983, 40 years of nothing but darkness and silence. Now they wanted running water, bathrooms, emergency stations. It was a big contract, worth $60,000. I drove up to Dawson City with my crew, 3 good workers I'd been using for years. Tom was my pipe fitter, been with me for 8 years. Randy handled the heavy equipment, and Steve was my apprentice, smart kid who knew his way around the tools. We had everything we needed: pipe cutters, welding equipment, pressure gauges, levels, the works. My truck was loaded with copper pipe, PVC fittings, and a portable generator for power tools. The mine entrance looked like a mouth in the side of the mountain, concrete and steel with a heavy door that took 2 men to open. The foreman, a guy named Bill, met us there the first morning. He was nervous, kept checking his watch and radio, told us the company wanted this job done fast, 2 weeks max. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Not just stale, there was something else, like wet copper and rotting meat. Bill said it was normal for old mines, just mineral deposits and maybe some dead animals that got trapped when they sealed it up. The main tunnel went straight into the mountain for over 1 kilometer. Our work area was the first 400 meters, but the tunnel kept going deeper and deeper into darkness. We set up our equipment and got to work. The pay was good, and the job was straightforward. Install main water lines along the tunnel walls, connect pressure valves every 50 meters, and set up drainage systems. I'd done similar work in old buildings and underground parking garages. This was just bigger, darker, and quieter. Too quiet. The first day went fine. We worked in the main tunnel, our headlamps cutting through dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. The tunnel was about 3 meters wide, carved right out of the rock. Old mining equipment was still there. Rusted rail tracks, broken carts, tools covered in grime. Everything normal for an abandoned mine. But around lunchtime, we started hearing sounds. It was Tom who noticed it first. He was installing a pressure gauge about 300 meters in when he stopped and held up his hand. We all went quiet. There it was, a scratching sound, like claws on metal. It seemed to come from deeper in the tunnel, past where our lights could reach. Probably bats, Bill said when we told him. Or rats. They get into old mines all the time. Nothing to worry about. That made sense. I'd dealt with rats in basements before. They could make all kinds of noise when they got spooked. We went back to work, but I noticed everyone was bulking a little louder than usual, like we didn't want to hear what might be scratching around in the dark. The second day, the scratching was louder. And it had a rhythm to it, like something was working at the sealed metal door that blocked off the deeper tunnels. Steve found the first claw marks around noon. He called us over to look, his voice shaky. The marks were fresh, cutting right through the rust on the metal door. 4 parallel gouges, each about 7 inches long. They were spaced too wide apart to be from any rat I'd ever seen. And they were deep. Whatever made them had serious claws. Must be bigger rats than I thought, Bill said, but he didn't sound convinced. He radioed the surface and talked in low voices for a few minutes. When he came back, he told us to stay away from the sealed sections and stick to our work area. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those marks. I went to the local library and looked up the mine's history. Most of it was normal stuff. Opened in 1952, good gold production, employed about 50 miners at its peak. But I found something strange in a 1983 newspaper article. The mine had been sealed suddenly after 3 miners disappeared in the deep tunnels. The official report said cave-in, but the newspaper told a different story. It said the miners' screams were heard for hours before everything went quiet. Rescue teams went down, but wouldn't go past 500 meters. They reported movement in the dark and sounds that weren't human. I didn't sleep well that night. Day 3 started bad and got worse. I was working alone, installing pipe connections about 400 meters in, when my headlamp started flickering. I smacked it a few times and it steadied, but the light seemed dimmer than usual. That's when I saw something move in a side tunnel to my right. It was hunched over, about the size of a large dog, but shaped all wrong. Its arms were too long, hanging almost to the ground, and it moved on all 4s, but not like any animal I'd ever seen. The movement was too smooth, too intelligent. I froze, and the thing stopped moving. That's when I realized it was watching me. I could see eyes reflecting my light. Pale yellow. Like a cat's, but bigger. Way bigger. The thing made a sound then. A clicking, chittering noise like insects, but lower, deeper. I felt it vibrate in my chest. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then I started backing away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. The thing followed, staying just at the edge of my light, matching my pace exactly. It moved wrong. Too many impacts when it walked, like it had more than 4 legs. I couldn't take it anymore. I broke and ran, my boots echoing in the tunnel. Behind me, I heard it pursuing. The footsteps didn't sound right. Too many of them. Too fast. Clicking on the stone like claws. I made it back to the main work area where my crew was. When I looked back, gasping and shaking, whatever had been chasing me was gone. The tunnel behind me was empty, just darkness and silence. "You okay, Derek?" Tom asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to explain what happened, but even as I said it, it sounded crazy. They thought I'd panicked in the dark, maybe claustrophobia getting to me, but Tom agreed to come check the side tunnel with me. That's when we found the tracks. They were pressed into the dust on the tunnel floor, handprint-shaped but with 6 fingers, each ending in a sharp claw, and trailing behind them was a drag mark, like something with a tail had passed through. Tom went pale. "What the hell made these?" I measured them with my tape measure. The prints were about 8 inches long, 6 inches wide. The claw marks were deep, gouging into the stone underneath the dust. Whatever made them was heavy and strong. Bill took one look at the tracks and called the Minty and Company. A safety inspector showed up 2 hours later, way too fast, like they'd been waiting for this call. He looked at the tracks and his face went white. He made a phone call, using words I didn't understand, talking about containment and Protocol 7. By evening, the entire site was shut down. They sent us home with full pay and non-disclosure agreements to sign. $15,000 each to keep our mouths shut about what we'd seen. I refused to sign until they told me what was down there. The inspector, a thin man named Carter, finally pulled me aside. He looked tired, like he'd been through this before. "Something survived down there," he said quietly. In 1983, the miners broke into a natural cave system that had been sealed for thousands of years. They found things living in the caves, pre-human things that evolved underground. I stared at him. "You're telling me there are actual monsters down there?" "The mine was sealed to trap them, but your construction work created gaps. Something got into the work tunnels." He rubbed his forehead. "We don't know how many are down there now. They reproduce in the dark. Could be dozens. What are you going to do about it?" "Pump the tunnels full of concrete. Seal everything permanently. Erase the problem." I signed the NDA and took the money. What choice did I have? Who would believe me? 2 weeks later, I drove past the mine site. Military vehicles everywhere. Armed soldiers, massive drilling equipment. The locals said the military showed up every few decades when the mine acts up. An old bartender told me his grandfather worked the mine in the 1950s and saw something pulled out of a deep shaft, still alive, but definitely not human. I started researching indigenous legends about the area, found stories about tunnel walkers, creatures that lived in the mountains before humans came, driven deep by the Ice Age. The legends said they were intelligent, used tools, hunted in packs. They considered humans prey. One story described gold miners in 1897 who dug into a cave and never caught me back out. Only their screaming was heard, echoing from the tunnels for days. The nightmares started a month later. Something crawling through my walls at night, scratching to get in. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, checking my doors and windows. Then one night, I found claw marks on my bedroom window, 3 stories up, 6 parallel gouges in the glass, just like the ones in the mine. I moved to Whitehorse the next week, but it didn't help. I kept seeing things in my peripheral vision, hunched shapes following me on empty streets. The other guys from my crew reported the same things, marks on windows, things watching from shadows. Then Tom disappeared. Police found his apartment locked from inside, no sign of struggle, just gone. But there were claw marks on his bedroom ceiling like something had crawled across it. When I called the mining company demanding answers, they told me to stay quiet or I'd be next. That's when I realized the NDAs weren't about liability. They were about keeping people from knowing these things could leave the tunnels. 6 months later, I saw a news report. Mysterious animal attacks near Dawson City. 2 hikers found dead, bodies partially eaten. The authorities blamed wolves, but I knew better. I'm living on Vancouver Island now, as far from the Yukon as I can get. But I still check my windows every night for claw marks. I still hear scratching in the walls, because I know the truth. Sealing the mine didn't kill what was inside. It just made them hungry. They're learning to hunt on the surface now. The Yukon wilderness is vast enough to hide a species that humanity forgot existed. Creatures that evolved in darkness for thousands of years, and now they're reclaiming their territory, one disappeared person at a time. And the mining company? Their only response is to pay for silence while people vanish into the northern wilderness, becoming jays. Just another animal attack in the remote Canadian mountains. If you ever get offered work in an old mine, especially one that's been sealed for decades, don't take the job. Some things are meant to stay buried in the dark, and some doors should never be opened. My name is James Morrison, and I've been a construction supervisor for 18 years. I started right out of high school, working my way up from a general laborer to running my own crews across northern Canada. I've overseen everything from highway repairs in -40 weather to emergency bridge work during spring floods. I've dealt with equipment breakdowns, injured workers, and impossible deadlines. I thought I'd seen every challenge this job could throw at me. But what happened last June outside Whitehorse changed everything I thought I knew about what lies beneath the ground we build on. Some things are buried for a reason, and climate change isn't just melting ice caps. It's waking up things that should have stayed frozen forever. The Riverside Heights development was supposed to be our biggest project of the year, 60 new homes on 200 acres of pristine wilderness about 30 miles outside Whitehorse. The land had never been developed, just untouched forest and rocky ground that had been frozen solid for thousands of years. My crew of 12 guys had been working the site for 2 weeks, clearing trees and preparing for excavation. We had our usual equipment, 2 backhoes, a bulldozer, dump trucks, and all the standard surveying gear. The client wanted to break ground by July 1st, so we were pushing hard to stay on schedule. June was unusually warm that year. Instead of our normal 15 degrees, we were hitting 25 Celsius every day. The permafrost was melting deeper than anyone had seen before. Our geologist, an older guy named Pete who'd worked the Yukon for 30 years, kept shaking his head at the soil samples. "Never seen thaw this deep," he told me. "The ground's soft down to 4 meters. Usually it's rock hard at 2. The excavation for the foundation work started on a Monday. We were digging basement foundations for the first row of houses, standard procedure. The backhoe operator, Danny, had been doing this job for 15 years. Nothing unusual at first, just the normal mix of soil, rocks, and tree roots you'd expect. I remember thinking how easy the digging was. The ground was so soft from the thaw that we were making great time. The project manager from the development company even called to congratulate us on being ahead of schedule. Everything felt routine, just another construction job in another beautiful piece of Canadian wilderness. That was Tuesday. Wednesday morning, everything changed. Danny called me over around 10 a.m. on Wednesday. "Boss, you need to see this," he shouted from the cab of his backhoe. "I hit something down here and it ain't rock." I walked over to the excavation pit about 8 feet deep and 20 feet wide. At the bottom, partially revealed by Danny's bucket, was something that made me stop dead. It looked like a massive egg or cocoon, about 6 feet long and dark brown, almost black. The surface had a leathery texture, like old leather that had been buried for years. "What do you think it is?" Danny asked, shutting off his engine. I climbed down into the pit to get a closer look. The thing was organic, definitely not rock or any geological formation I'd ever seen. It felt warm to the touch, warmer than the surrounding soil. The surface had a pattern of ridges and lines, almost like it was designed by something. Keep digging around it, I told Danny. Let's see how big this thing is. As we carefully excavated around the first object, we found more. 7 of them in total, clustered together like someone had buried them in a specific pattern. Each one was roughly the same size, all with that same dark, leathery surface. Pete, the geologist, came over to take a look. He crouched down in the pit with me, running his hands over the surface of the largest one. "I've never seen anything like this," he said quietly. "This isn't geological. This is biological." The crew gathered around the edge of the pit, everyone talking at once. Some of the guys thought they might be dinosaur eggs. Others thought maybe they were some kind of geological formation we just didn't recognize. I was thinking we should call the university, maybe get some researchers out here to identify them. But we had a schedule to keep. The client was paying us by the day, and any delays would come out of our budget. I made the decision to work around them. We'd photograph everything, document the exact location, and report it to the proper authorities after work. No point in holding up the entire project for what might just be some unusual rocks. That decision still haunts me. Around 4 p.m., one of the workers called out from the pit. "Hey boss, come look at this." I walked over and saw immediately what had caught his attention. The largest cocoon, the one Pete and I had examined earlier, now had a crack running down one side. A thin line, maybe a 1/4 inch wide, that definitely hadn't been there that morning. I climbed down for a closer look. The crack was clean and straight, like something had split it from the inside. As I knelt beside it, I could see movement. Something inside was shifting, pressing against the walls. A thick, amber-colored fluid was leaking out, and the smell hit me immediately, like rotting meat mixed with old eggs. "Everyone back," I called up to the crew. "Something's not right here." I pulled out my phone and called the Yukon Government Environment Office. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone who listened to my description of what we'd found. "You need to stop work immediately," the official told me. "Don't touch anything. We're sending someone out, but it'll take a few hours." I explained about our schedule, the client's deadline, but he cut me off. "Sir, if what you're describing is what I think it is, your schedule is the least of your concerns. Keep everyone away from those objects and watch it for our team." By 6 p.m., 3 more of the cocoons had developed cracks. The leathery shells were peeling back like flower petals, revealing glimpses of what was inside. Pale, segmented bodies, each about 4 feet long. They looked like massive insect larvae, but wrong somehow. Too big, too developed. The things were moving more now, responding to the warmth of the air. I could see them writhing inside their shells, pressing against the openings, trying to get out. I took video on my phone and sent it to the government official. He called back within minutes. "Get everyone off that site right now," he screamed into the phone. "Those are Pleistocene parasites. They've been frozen for 30,000 years. You need to evacuate immediately." Before I could respond, the first one broke free. The largest cocoon split open completely, and what came out wasn't the larva we'd seen inside. It had transformed, unfolded into something that belonged in a nightmare. The body was like a centipede's, but thick as a man's torso and about 8 feet long. Dozens of legs, each ending in sharp claws. The head was the worst part. It split open like a flower, revealing circular rings of teeth, layer after layer going deep into its throat. It moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. One of my workers, Tommy, a young guy who'd been with me for 2 years, was standing too close to the edge of the pit. The thing scuttled up the wall like it was flat ground and wrapped around his leg before anyone could react. Tommy's scream will haunt me forever. The creature's body was secreting something that burned his skin on contact. We could see his genes dissolving where it touched him, the flesh underneath turning black and bubbling. 4 of us grabbed shovels and pried the thing off him. It was incredibly strong, and the chemical it produced burned our hands even through GH work gloves. When we finally got it loose, it scuttled back into the pit and disappeared into one of the tunnels it had made. Tommy collapsed, his leg covered in chemical burns. The flesh was dissolving, literally melting off the bone. We wrapped him in a tarp and rushed him to the hospital in town, but I knew it was bad, real bad. Within an hour, military vehicles were surrounding our site. Soldiers in full hazmat suits established a perimeter and ordered us into a quarantine tent. Through the plastic windows, we watched them spray the entire excavation with flamethrowers, burning everything. A military official in a biohazard suit explained what we'd found. The creatures were parasites from the Pleistocene era, preserved perfectly in the permafrost for 30,000 years. They used to infest megafauna, woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, cave bears. They would burrow into their hosts and feed until the animal died. Climate change is melting permafrost all across the Yukon, he told us. These things are waking up. This is the 4th site this year. I asked what happened at the other sites. He wouldn't give details, just said casualties occurred. Tommy died that night at the hospital. The autopsy revealed larvae inside his body. The creature had laid eggs in the wound, and they'd hatched within hours. The hospital was evacuated and fumigated. 3 staff members who'd treated Tommy started showing symptoms. 2 of my crew members developed fevers and internal burning sensations during our 2-week quarantine. They were isolated, and I never saw them again, but I heard screaming from the medical tent at night. When quarantine ended, we were made to sign NDAs and given payments that felt like hush money. The construction site was declared environmentally hazardous and permanently closed. 3 months later, the entire area was paved over with concrete. I started noticing reports from around the Yukon. Strange animal die-offs, unexplained illnesses in remote areas. I recognized the pattern. Permafrost melt sites where something ancient was being released. I tried to contact a journalist to tell my story, but before we could meet, his house burned down. Then I got a call from an unknown number. Stop asking questions or your family is next. I moved my family to southern British Columbia, away from the permafrost zones. But I follow the news obsessively. Every summer, the reports increase. More mysterious deaths, more quarantine zones, more random sites suddenly paved over with concrete. The government knows these creatures are emerging all over the territory. Their only solution is to burn, bury, and silence anyone who talks. But I wonder how long they can keep containing it. Every warm summer awakens something new, something that humanity was never meant to encounter. I check my family's skin every night for chemical burns. The ancient world is returning, one thaw at a time. And somewhere under all that concrete, in frozen ground across the north, more of those things are waiting for the next warm day to wake up and remember how to hunt. My name is Tyler Matthews, and I've been a professional photographer for 12 years. I've shot everything from war zones in Afghanistan to polar expeditions in Antarctica. My camera has taken me to places most people only see in magazines, and I've built my reputation on getting the shots that other photographers won't risk their lives for. I specialize in extreme environment photography, the kind where your equipment fails, your fingers go numb, and you're always one mistake away from dying. But what happened in February 2024, during a convoy mission to a remote weather station in northern Yukon, showed me that some things following you in the wilderness aren't wild animals or bad weather. Some things are much worse. I got the assignment through National Geographic. They wanted me to document a routine supply run to one of Canada's most isolated weather stations. It sounded simple enough. 3 weeks documenting climate researchers doing their job in one of the coldest places on Earth. The money was good, the story angle was solid, and I needed the work after a slow winter season. Dr. Yukon, the lead researcher, had been making this trip for 8 years. 2 pilots, Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb, would handle the vehicles and logistics. We'd take the old winter road through absolute wilderness, resupply the station, and I'd get my photos for the magazine. Standard professional assignment. The convoy was 3 modified Arctic vehicles, heavy-duty trucks with specialized tires, extra fuel tanks, and communication equipment. We filed an exclusive travel permit because the road isn't maintained in winter. Nobody else should be out there. The weather forecast showed clear conditions, -40 temperatures, but nothing we couldn't handle. I packed my cold weather camera gear, extra batteries, and enough memory cards to shoot thousands of photos. My Canon 5D Mark IV had never failed me in extreme conditions, and I had backup equipment for everything important. We left from Whitehorse on February 12th. Day 1 went perfectly. The trucks handled the snow-packed road well, we made good time, and I got some great shots of the empty wilderness. Dr. Ewan was excited about the research data waiting at the station. Sarah and Marcus kept the convoy moving smoothly, checking in on the radio every 30 minutes. Everything felt routine and professional. That first night we camped beside the road, set up our heated tents, and shared hot coffee around a portable heater. The stars were incredible. No light pollution for hundreds of miles. I thought this would be an easy assignment. Day 2 started the same way. Clear skies, good road conditions, vehicles running perfectly. I was riding with Dr. Ewan in the lead truck, taking photos through the windshield and planning the shots I'd need at the weather station. Around noon, Sarah's voice came through the radio from the rear vehicle. "Tyler, Dr. Ewan, we've got company back here." I looked at Dr. Ewan. "Company?" "Another vehicle," Sarah continued. "Dark-colored, maybe a kilometer behind us. Been there for about 20 minutes now." Dr. Ewan grabbed the radio. "That's impossible. Nobody else has permits for this road. Are you sure it's following us?" "Positive. Same speed, same distance. Hasn't gotten closer or farther." I pulled out my telephoto lens and turned around in my seat. Through the rear window, I could barely make out a dark shape in the distance. Even with the 400mm lens, it was just a speck. But it was definitely there, and it was definitely following us. Dr. Ewan tried radioing the vehicle. No response. He switched to emergency frequencies, then tried the standard highway channels. Nothing. The vehicle just kept following, maintaining exactly 1 kilometer distance. For 6 hours, it stayed there. Never closer, never farther. I kept checking with my telephoto lens, taking photos, trying to get details. The shape looked wrong somehow, not quite like any vehicle I knew, but at that distance in the snow glare, I couldn't be sure. When we stopped for the night, the other vehicle stopped too. We could see its lights in the distance, just sitting there. Dr. Ewan tried the radio again to contact our base station in Whitehorse, but got nothing but static. "Heavy interference," he said, though the sky was clear. "Could be solar activity," he explained, but he looked worried. We set up camp and took shifts, keeping watch. Sarah had her rifle ready, standard equipment for polar bear country. During my watch around 3 a.m., I saw movement between our camp and the distant lights. I grabbed my binoculars and looked. A figure was walking toward us. Human-shaped, but something was wrong with how it moved. The limbs didn't bend right. The proportions looked off. I woke the others, and we all watched through binoculars as the figure approached to about 100 meters, then stopped. "Who are you?" Sarah shouted into the darkness. "Identify yourself." The figure didn't respond. We shined our spotlights on it, and I nearly dropped my binoculars. It looked almost human, but too tall, arms too long, head too large, and it was completely naked in -40 temperature, not shivering, not affected by the cold at all. Sarah started walking toward it with her rifle raised. "This is your last warning. Identify yourself." The figure tilted its head. Not like a person would. It tilted completely sideways, 180 degrees, until its head was upside down. Then its face split open horizontally. Not like a mouth opening, like someone had cut its face in half. The opening was lined with bone-white protrusions, and it made a sound like metal grinding against metal. Sarah fired twice. I saw both shots hit center mass through my binoculars, but the figure didn't react, didn't fall, didn't bleed, didn't even flinch. It just turned around and walked back toward the distant lights, moving backwards but not turning around. Its upside-down face kept watching us the entire time. We packed up immediately, left half our gear, threw everything else in the trucks, and drove through the night without stopping. The lights followed us, maintaining their 1 kilometer distance, relentless and precise. When dawn came, I checked the photos I'd taken the day before. I zoomed in on the distant vehicle image and felt my stomach drop. The shape wasn't right. The proportions were wrong. It looked like something pretending to be a vehicle, but not quite getting it right. "We're running low on fuel," Marcus reported over the radio. "No refueling stations for another 200 kilometers. Dr. Ewan made the decision. "We stop and confront this thing before we run out of gas and die out here." We stopped the convoy. The thing behind us stopped too, right on schedule, 1 kilometer back. Through binoculars, we watched as the vehicle began to change. The metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into something larger and more angular. Nothing like any human design I'd ever seen. Multiple figures emerged from it, 5 or 6 identical shapes, all with the wrong proportions. The figures began walking toward us in a perfect line, moving faster than before. I kept taking photos, my journalist instincts overriding my terror. When they got within 200 meters, they stopped. One of them raised an arm, pointing directly at our convoy. All 3 truck engines died simultaneously. Electronics shut off. Even my camera stopped working. We were stranded in -40 with no power, no heat, and 6 impossible things walking toward us. Sarah tried to fire her rifle, but it jammed. The bolt wouldn't move, like the metal had seized solid. The figures stopped at 50 meters and just stood there, watching us. Not moving closer, but not leaving. For 3 hours, we sat in a standoff. The vehicles were getting cold inside. We were starting to freeze. Dr. Yuen made a desperate decision. He got out of the truck with his hands raised, trying to communicate. "We're scientists. We're not here to harm anyone." The figures didn't react until he got within 10 meters. Then one of them moved forward to meet him. We watched in horror as Dr. Yuen and the figure faced each other. The figure reached out and touched his forehead with one elongated finger. Dr. Yuen collapsed. The figure caught him gently, laid him on the ground like he was precious cargo, and all the figures walked back to their shifting vehicle. The thing changed shape again, lifted off the ground on no visible propulsion, and disappeared into the sky in seconds. Just vanished. Our truck engines restarted immediately. All the electronics came back online like nothing had happened. We rushed to Dr. Yuen. He was alive but unconscious, with a mark on his forehead like a burn in the shape of a perfect circle. We drove straight to the nearest town and got medical help. Dr. Yuen woke up 3 days later with no memory of the encounter, but he was different. Sometimes he would speak in a language nobody recognized. He drew symbols that matched no known writing system, and he would stare at the sky for hours like he was waiting for something to return. My camera had one photo that survived, the moment their vehicle lifted off. When I had it analyzed by experts, they confirmed it showed technology beyond anything humans have developed. Military investigators debriefed all of us. We signed NDAs. My magazine killed the article under national security pressure, but I kept the one photo hidden, and I know what I saw. The weather station we were heading to was found abandoned 2 weeks later. All the equipment was still functioning perfectly, but the staff had vanished without a trace. I still work as a photographer, but I've never taken another Arctic assignment. Because I know that the Yukon wilderness is so vast that entire civilizations could hide there. Things that watch the roads and sometimes decide to follow, mimicking our vehicles, studying us, and occasionally taking someone to learn from. Dr. Yuen still calls me sometimes. He doesn't remember what happened, but he tells me about his dreams of vast spaces between stars and cities that hang in empty space and beings that have been watching Earth for longer than humans have existed. Nobody will believe this story because belief requires evidence, and all the evidence has been confiscated except for one photo of something in the sky that shouldn't exist. But if you ever find yourself driving through the deep wilderness and notice something following you at exactly the same distance, maintaining perfect pace no matter how you change speed, don't stop to investigate. Just keep driving and pray it loses interest in you, because some things in the wilderness aren't hunting for food or territory. They're hunting for knowledge, and they have all the time in the world to study us. And sometimes they decide to take one of us home. My name is Lisa Chen, and I've been a registered nurse for 8 years. I work the night shift at Whitehorse Hospital, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the emergency department. I've seen people die, watched families fall apart, and held the hands of strangers taking their last breath. I thought I knew what real fear looked like. But what happened in that basement apartment changed everything I thought I knew about the living and the dead. In March 2024, I was desperate to find somewhere closer to work. Gas prices were killing me, and the 40-minute drive home after a 12-hour shift was becoming dangerous. I'd fall asleep at red lights, my head nodding forward until car horns jolted me awake. So when I saw the ad for a basement apartment just 6 blocks from the hospital, I called immediately. The Hendersons were a retired couple in their 70s. Sweet people, or so I thought. Mrs. Henderson had gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore cardigans, even in warm weather. Mr. Henderson was tall and thin, with hands that shook slightly when he held the house keys. They seemed nervous when they showed me around, exchanging glances I couldn't read. The basement apartment was perfect, newly renovated with fresh paint, modern appliances, and a separate entrance. The rent was $800 a month, incredibly cheap for the area. My bedroom was directly under what they called their storage room, and the bathroom had brand new fixtures. Everything smelled like fresh drywall and possibility. "We just finished the renovation," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice tight. "We wanted to make it nice for whoever moved in." Mr. Henderson kept checking his watch, like he wanted the tour to end quickly. When I said I'd take it and could move in that weekend, Mrs. Henderson's smile looked forced. "Are you sure you want to live in a basement?" she asked. "Some people find it confining." But the location was perfect. The price was right, and I needed somewhere immediately. I signed the lease that afternoon. My first week was exactly what I'd hoped for. After working all night at the hospital, I'd drive home in 6 minutes instead of 40, stumble down to my basement apartment, and sleep like the dead until 5 p.m. The apartment stayed cool and dark during the day, perfect for someone who needed to sleep while the rest of the world was awake. The hospital kept me busy. White Horse Emergency was always crazy. Overdoses, car accidents, heart attacks, domestic violence calls. I'd learned to compartmentalize, to focus on blood pressure readings and IV insertions instead of the stories behind the injuries. My supervisor, Janet, always said I was one of the most reliable night nurses. I took pride in that. During my first week in the basement, I never heard the Hendersons upstairs. The apartment was silent during the day, exactly what I needed. I'd bought blackout curtains and a white noise machine, creating the perfect sleep environment. Everything was working out perfectly. My first night off was a Thursday. I'd worked Monday through Wednesday nights and had Thursday night free. For once, I wanted to try sleeping normal hours, maybe watch some TV, feel like a regular person. I went to bed around 11 p.m. instead of my usual 8 a.m. That's when I heard the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just normal house sounds. Old houses settle, people move around upstairs. But these footsteps had a pattern. They started directly above my bedroom around midnight. A slow, steady walk from one end of the room to the other, wall to window, over and over again. The footsteps weren't random. They followed the exact same path every time. 27 steps from wall to window, a pause, then 27 steps back. I counted them, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The wreaths. Tim was hypnotic and annoying. I figured it was Mr. Henderson having trouble sleeping. Old people get insomnia. Maybe he was worried about money or his health. I put in my earbuds and eventually fell asleep around 3 a.m. The next night, the pacing started again at midnight, but this time it was faster, more frantic. Instead of the slow, measured walk, the footsteps were quick and agitated, and I could hear furniture dragging across the floor, heavy scraping sounds like someone moving a dresser or a bookshelf. By 2 a.m., I was exhausted and frustrated. I had to work the next night, and I needed sleep. So I put on my robe and went upstairs to politely ask them to keep it down. I knocked softly on their front door. Mr. Henderson answered after a few minutes, looking confused and half asleep. His hair was messy, and he was wearing pajamas. "Lisa, is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, "but could you maybe keep the noise down upstairs? I know someone's having trouble sleeping, but the pacing and furniture moving is keeping me awake." His face went pale. "Pacing? What pacing?" Mrs. Henderson appeared behind him in her nightgown, looking worried. "What's wrong?" "Lisa says she hears pacing upstairs," Mr. Henderson said quietly. Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with tears immediately. She grabbed my arm with a surprisingly strong grip. "She's back," she whispered. "Oh God, she's back." Mr. Henderson shushed his wife, but I could see the fear in both their faces. Something was very wrong. "What's going on?" I asked. "Who's back?" Mrs. Henderson was crying now, and Mr. Henderson looked like he might throw up. He ran his hands through his thin hair and sighed. "Come with me," he said. "I need to show you something." We went upstairs to their main floor. The Hendersons' bedroom was on the opposite side of the house from where I'd been hearing the pacing. Mr. Henderson led me to a door I hadn't noticed during my apartment tour. "This is the storage room," he said, his hand shaking as he turned the doorknob. "It's directly above your bedroom." The room was full of boxes, old furniture, and Christmas decorations. Dust covered everything like a gray blanket, but in the middle of the floor, there was a clear path worn into the dust. Wall to window, wall to window. The path was so worn that I could see the wood flooring underneath, polished smooth by countless footsteps. My skin started crawling. Something had been pacing in this room for so long that it had worn through dust that looked months old. "How long has this path been here?" I asked. Mr. Henderson's voice was barely a whisper. "Since before we renovated your apartment." The Hendersons looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation. Finally, Mrs. Henderson sat down on an old chair and wiped her eyes. "We should have told you before you moved in," she said. "But we needed the money so badly. We're going to lose the house if we can't make the mortgage payments." Mr. Henderson sat down beside his wife. "Our daughter Patricia used to live in the basement before we renovated it into an apartment. She had problems," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Mental health problems, severe paranoia and delusions. She believed people were watching her, following her. She would pace for hours, especially at night, convinced that someone was outside her window." I felt a chill run down my spine. The basement only had one small window, the one in my bedroom. "Patricia would walk back and forth from her bed to that window," Mr. Henderson said. "Wall to window, sometimes for 6 or 7 hours straight. We could hear her upstairs, pacing, pacing, pacing." "Where is she now?" I asked, though I had a terrible feeling I already knew the answer. Mrs. Henderson started crying again. "She disappeared in 2019. One night in October, she just vanished. We found her bedroom door locked from the inside, but she was gone. No sign of how she got out. No note, no explanation. The police searched everywhere." "They investigated for months," Mr. Henderson added, "but there was no evidence of foul play, no body, nothing. She was just gone. I should have moved out immediately. Every instinct told me to pack my stuff and find somewhere else to live. But I'd signed a year lease, and breaking it would cost me 3 months' rent. Money I didn't have. Plus, I felt sorry for the Hendersons. They were losing their house, and they'd already lost their daughter." That night, the pacing started at 11 p.m. sharp. This time, I decided to count. Wall to window. Wall to window. 27 steps each way, just like I'd calculated before. But instead of stopping after an hour or two, it continued all night long. I counted 847 complete trips from wall to window before the sun came up and the footsteps finally stopped. I went to work that night exhausted and shaky. During my break, I tried to research the house online, looking for any information about Patricia Henderson or the previous owners. I found Patricia's missing person report from 2019, complete with her photo. She was 28 when she disappeared, with long dark hair and sad eyes. The report mentioned her mental health struggles and said she was considered vulnerable. My work started suffering. I made medication errors, forgot to check on patients, and Janet pulled me aside after my third night back. "Lisa, you look terrible," she said. "Are you getting enough sleep? Because if you can't handle the night shift anymore, I need to know." I wanted to tell her about the pacing, about Patricia, about the worn path in the dust. But how do you explain to your supervisor that you think your apartment is haunted? After a week of sleepless nights, I was at my breaking point. I'd tried sleeping during my breaks at the hospital, catnapping in the break room, but it wasn't enough. The pacing was driving me insane. On my next night off, I lay in bed listening to the footsteps above me, wall to window, the same rhythm, the same 27 steps each way. Finally, around 3 a.m., I snapped. I sat up in bed and screamed at the ceiling, "What do you want?" The pacing stopped immediately. The silence was somehow worse than the footsteps. It felt heavy and expectant, like something was listening, waiting. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I realized I was holding my breath. Then I heard it, a woman's voice, muffled but clear, coming from somewhere above me. "Help me," the voice said. "I'm still here. I'm still in the walls." I ran upstairs in my pajamas and pounded on the Hendersons' door until they answered. Both of them looked terrified when they saw my face. "You have to come listen," I said, dragging them toward the storage room. "She's trying to talk to us." We stood in the storage room, all three of us holding our breath, waiting. And then we heard it again. Patricia's voice, faint but unmistakable, coming from inside the walls. "I'm here," she said. I found her. I found Helen. Mr. Henderson went to the garage and came back with a crowbar. His hands were shaking so badly that Mrs. Henderson had to help him position it against the wall. They started tearing into the drywall where Patricia's voice seemed strongest. The drywall crumbled easily, revealing pink insulation. Mr. Henderson pulled that away too, and behind it was a gap, a narrow space between the interior and exterior walls, maybe 18 inches wide. "Oh my God," Mrs. Henderson whispered. Inside the gap was a backpack. Mr. Henderson reached in carefully and pulled it out. Inside were Patricia's wallet, her cell phone, the battery long dead, and a notebook. I opened the notebook to the last entry, written in shaky handwriting. October 15th, 2019. I can hear them in the walls now. The voices are clearer tonight. Helen is calling for help. She's been alone so long. They want me to come inside to help her. They say I'll be safe inside the walls. Mom and Dad thous. Inc. I'm crazy, but I know what I heard. Helen needs someone to find her. I'm going to help. Mr. Henderson was on his hands and knees now, shining a flashlight deeper into the wall cavity. At the bottom of the space, the gap narrowed to maybe 12 inches wide. "There's something else down here," he said, his voice breaking. The police came within an hour. The forensics team worked for 2 days, carefully removing everything from inside the walls. They found 2 sets of remains. The first skeleton belonged to Helen Torres, a woman who had disappeared in 1981. She'd been reported as abandoning her family, but really she'd been murdered and hidden in the walls by her husband, who had owned the house before the Hendersons bought it. The second skeleton was Patricia. She'd crawled into the wall space looking for Helen, following the voices only she could hear. The gap narrowed as it went down, and she'd gotten stuck trying to reach the older bones. She died of dehydration, trapped in that tiny space, her hand reaching toward Helen's remains. Patricia had spent her final hours inches away from the body she was trying to find, dying alone in the dark, still trying to help someone. The detective explained that Patricia's mental illness had made her sensitive to something the rest of us couldn't perceive. She'd heard Helen calling for help from inside the walls, and she'd died trying to answer that call. Both women received proper burials. Helen's family had closure after 43 years of not knowing what happened to her. Patricia was finally at peace, her mission completed. The Hendersons couldn't live in the house anymore. They sold it immediately and moved to a senior community across town. I attended both funerals, Patricia's and Helen's. Patricia's service was small, just family and a few friends, but the pastor talked about her compassion and her desire to help others, even when no one believed her. After the burials, I drove past the house one last time. There was a light in the basement window, my old bedroom. 2 figures stood there, side by side. A young woman with long dark hair and an older woman with graying curls. They stood together for just a moment. Then the light went out. The house was demolished 6 months later. The new owners built a modern home on the lot with no basement, just a concrete slab foundation. I still work night shifts at Whitehorse Hospital, but now I live in a high-rise apartment downtown. The walls are thin, and I can hear my neighbors' TVs, their conversations, their daily lives. Most people would find the noise annoying, but I find it comforting. Proof of life, of people existing around me. I keep a photo of Patricia on my car dashboard now. It reminds me that mental illness doesn't make someone's suffering less real, that Patricia died trying to help someone, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe someone when they say they hear voices. Because sometimes, terrifyingly, the voices are real. And sometimes, the dead are just waiting for someone to listen. My name is Owen Mitchell, and I've been a high school janitor for 22 years. I know that doesn't sound like much, but I take pride in my work. I keep Whitehorse Secondary School running smooth, fixing broken lockers, cleaning up after teenagers, making sure the heating works when it's 40 below. I've seen it all in those hallways. But what happened at Kluane Lake last September changed everything I thought I knew about being alone in the wilderness. I've been fishing Kluane Lake every September for 12 years straight. It's my 1 week off, my escape from mopping floors and dealing with broken toilets. That lake is huge, over 400 square kilometers. But I know every cove, every rocky shore, every good fishing spot. I've got my routes memorized, my favorite campsites marked on my GPS. For 12 years, nothing ever went wrong. September 15th started perfect. Clear sky, calm water, my little aluminum boat cutting through the lake like butter. I had my usual gear, a 15-horsepower Mercury outboard, my Humminbird fish finder, a handheld GPS that never let me down. I'd been out there 3 days already, caught some decent lake trout, set up my tent at the usual spot near the south shore. That afternoon, around 4 o'clock, I was about 5 kilometers from shore when I noticed the clouds building up fast, real fast. In the Yukon, weather can change quick, but this was different. The sky went from blue to black in maybe 10 minutes. Then the wind hit. I've been through storms on Kluane before, but nothing like this. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in minutes. Rain started coming down so hard I couldn't see past the front of my boat. Waves came out of nowhere, tossing my little boat around like a toy. My fish finder screen went crazy, showing depth readings that made no sense. I checked my GPS. It showed I was only half a kilometer from shore, but I couldn't see anything through the rain and fog. Then I saw lights. Warm yellow lights cutting through the storm, maybe 200 meters away. I gunned the motor toward them, fighting to keep the boat straight. I hit shore harder than I meant to, the aluminum hull scraping against rocks I couldn't see. I tied off quick to a big boulder and looked around. The lights were coming from a cabin about 50 meters inland. Smoke was rising from the chimney. Here's the thing. I know every building around Kluane Lake. There's the ranger station, a few fishing lodges, some research cabins, but there's no cabin in this spot. I was absolutely sure. I'd fished this exact area dozens of times, but there it was, solid as anything, with warm light in the windows. I grabbed my rain jacket and ran for the cabin. The storm was getting worse, hail starting to mix with the rain. I knocked on the heavy wooden door, water dripping off my jacket. An old man answered, late 70s, maybe older, with a weathered face and gray hair. He was wearing clothes that looked old, not just worn out, but old-fashioned. A thick wool sweater, canvas pants, leather boots that looked handmade. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside and waved me in. The inside made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say why at first. Everything was from decades ago. Wood paneling on all the walls, a rotary phone on a little table, an old tube TV in the corner. There was a calendar on the wall stuck on March 1976. Not 2024, 1976. Storm's bad, the old man finally said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. You'll stay. It wasn't a question. Thanks, I said, trying to be polite. I'll just wait it out and head back to my camp. Don't want to impose. His face darkened. They all say that. But the lake decides who stays and who goes. I looked around more carefully. There were photographs on the walls. Old, black and white pictures of the same man, but younger, with a woman and 2 teenage boys. A family. Nice family, I said, trying to make conversation. They around? Gone to the water, he said. All of them. The lake took them back. Something was wrong with his eyes. In the lamplight, they looked too dark, almost black, and they reflected light like an animal's eyes do. I felt the hair on my neck stand up. "Mind if I use your phone?" I asked. "Just want to let someone know I'm okay. Phones don't work here. Haven't for years. We're outside time." I pulled out my cell phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual out here, but the battery was draining fast. I watched it go from 73% to 12% in seconds. That wasn't possible. The old man went to the stove and stirred a pot. "Hungry? Made stew." The smell hit me then. It looked like normal beef stew, but it smelled rotten. Old meat, spoiled vegetables. I fought not to gag. "No thanks, I ate already," I lied. "Suit yourself." He ladled some into a bowl and ate it like it was perfectly normal. "I should get back to my boat," I said, moving toward the door. He stood up fast, blocking my way. For an old man, he was surprisingly strong-looking. "You can't leave until the lake is satisfied." "What does that mean?" "Someone comes, someone stays. That's how it works." I pushed past him. He grabbed my arm with fingers that felt like ice, but I broke free and ran into the storm. The rain was coming down even harder now, and I could barely see where I was going. I got to the shore where I'd tied up my boat. The rope was still there, still tied to the rock. But my boat was gone. I ran along the rocky shore, slipping on wet stones, searching everywhere. Nothing. Then I saw lights on the water. My boat floating about 30 meters offshore, drifting away from me. The motor wasn't running. It was just drifting. I was about to jump in the water when I felt a hand on my shoulder. The old man had followed me, moving silent as a ghost through the storm. "The lake takes, the lake keeps," he said. "You stay until someone else comes." His voice sounded different, younger. I turned to look at his face and nearly screamed. It was changing. The wrinkles were smoothing out, the gray hair darkening. The features were shifting, becoming someone else entirely. Then it changed again, and again. I was looking at different people. Men, women, young, old. Like a slideshow of human faces, cycling through one after another. But the eyes stayed the same. Those dark, reflecting eyes. I realized I wasn't looking at one person. I was looking at something wearing the faces of everyone who'd come to this place. I broke free and dove into the freezing water. It was wrong. Too thick, like it was trying to grab me. The waves felt like hands pulling at my clothes, my legs. But I fought through it, swimming hard toward my boat. The water was so cold it felt like knives. My muscles were already starting to cramp up. But I reached the boat and hauled myself over the side, gasping and shaking. I hit the starter. The engine caught on the first pull. A miracle, considering how cold and wet everything was. I gunned it, turning back toward shore. The thing on the beach was watching me leave. As I got farther away, I could see the cabin starting to fade, like someone was turning down the lights. The warm yellow glow flickered and went out, one window at a time. I heard voices shouting across the water. Not one voice, but many, all at once. "Come back! You have to come back!" I steered by pure instinct through the storm. My GPS was dead, my fish finder was showing nothing but static. But somehow I found the main marina. I tied up at the dock and collapsed, my whole body shaking from cold and fear. The park rangers found me there at dawn, unconscious and nearly dead from hypothermia. They got me to Whitehorse Hospital, where I spent 2 days recovering. I tried to explain what happened, but it sounded crazy even to me. I drew them a map showing exactly where the cabin was. They sent a team out to search. They found nothing, just wilderness, no sign any building had ever been there. But they did find something else. A rotted boat hull, half buried on the shore near where I said the cabin was. Inside were old fishing tackle and gear. The name painted on the stern was barely visible. Kincaid. The Rangers checked their records. Thomas Kincaid disappeared on Kluon Lake in March 1976 with his wife and 2 sons. Their boat was found empty, drifting. All 4 family members vanished without a trace. The local indigenous elders weren't surprised when the Rangers told them my story. They said there are thin places around Kluan Lake where the boundary between worlds gets weak. People who go into thin places during storms sometimes don't come back, or they come back changed, or they bring something back with them. I recovered from the hypothermia, but other things started happening. I'd lose time, hours would disappear, and I'd find myself in places with no memory of how I got there. One night I woke up standing in my backyard in Whitehorse, soaking wet, with lake water pooling at my feet. The nearest lake was 300 kilometers away. I quit my job at the school. Couldn't handle being alone in those empty hallways anymore. I moved in with my sister in Vancouver, too scared to live by myself. 6 months later, my sister called the police. She'd gone to check on me in the morning and found my bedroom window open, wet footprints leading out across the carpet. I was gone. The police found lake water on the carpet and windowsill. They also found a photograph on my nightstand that I'd never seen before. It showed me standing on a rocky shore with an old man's hand on my shoulder. We were both facing the camera, smiling. The background showed a cabin that shouldn't exist. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, "The lake always collects what it's owed." They never found me. But 6 weeks later, my boat was discovered drifting on Kluan Lake, empty except for a calendar inside, open to March 1976. The locals say if you fish Kluan during September storms, you might see lights on shore that don't belong, a cabin that moves from place to place, and an old man who wears the faces of everyone the lake has taken, forever waiting for the next person to arrive so he can finally leave. But the lake never lets anyone go. It just keeps collecting, one fisherman at a time.